transformed into this other guy.
Yeah.
And then brought a whole fucking country with him.
Dude, this is not a great comparison at all, but in terms of behavior, if we're talking like in terms of the behavior of like putting on an act, it's the whole thing with Andrew Tate. I'm not that he is Hitler. Let me make that clear. He is not Hitler. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying this whole thing of putting on an act in front of people. And
it's cult leadership.
Yeah, it's a cult leadership. And kind of like the segue of Tate, which I find so fascinating with him, is he says so many things that a lot of, I guess, disenfranchised men, I don't know if that's the right word, but a lot of men that are seeking a role model right now, they gravitate to a guy that's hyper masculine.
Yes.
And this guy is hyper masculine. And it's funny because I'm thinking 5 years ago, who was the guy men were going to? It was Jordan Peterson. You think of a guy who's more moderate, but still, like, at that time, that guy's extreme.
And then then the pandemic happened, and it took a whole different...
And then now it's gone to someone even more extreme
of
this Andrew Tate. And, like, you'll see him in some podcasts, like, he's done the whatever podcast and stuff, where he's just like, women are property. Like, he'll say outlandish crap like that, and you're like, dude, why do you even, like this guy? But then he'll follow it up with being like, men are supposed to go to the gym, work out, eat healthy. They're supposed to get their life together, support the woman. You're like, well, I agree with that. Like, why do you have to put on this act, essentially? Like, why do people gravitate towards that when they even know that they know it's an act. They know it's not real, but they like it. It's kind of a weird...
Because it tells them what they want to hear. It's like when people start saying things that are so out of whack and shocking, you have to, like, tragedy porn watch it.
Yeah.
And then when you watch it, you're going to watch it because why? It's, like, tragic what they're saying in a way. It's not the right word, but you know what I mean. It's like totally disagreeable. To the point that now your bar has been set so low that then the minute you are now looking for them to say something right. Mm-hmm. So when they do, it hits with double. They're like, whoa, that's a good point. I remember the first time I really sat and watched him was the first podcast. I think he did multiple, but the very first one he did with the Nelk Boy kids. And they were not ready for that one. Because, you know, you got to be willing to step in and cut a guy like that off and say, no, you shut the fuck up. You know, you're on my show. Let's talk about that. But he would go on and on talking so fast about how
my Bugatti.
and then suddenly he's like, she's my property. And like he would say what would happen is they'd be like leaning in, but no, she's my property. You don't understand. And he'd keep going. And he was like crowd working because there's like 3 of them there. And he'd be working all of them and they'd be trying to step in. And then he'd say something that was right, which is that men are being feminized at a rapid pace in America these days. And then the guys who'd be sitting there ready to be like, but, oh yeah, no, that's right. And he'd be like, right. And they'd be like, yeah, no, that's exactly right. So now he hit him with like that dopamine, like, ooh, I got one right. Now he'd keep saying things, start saying bullshit again. And then when they go to cut him off, no, hold on a minute. And anyway, I think that young males have never been lower testosterone in the history of America. And they're like, oh, that's... So he'd hit him 1 out of 10.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's how this guy goes. The controversy and then saying some of the things that are clippable because they are real.
It's like sales. Like, I've done a little bit of sales, and it's like, you know, they call it a shit sandwich, right? Mm-hmm. You pile in some good stuff in the beginning, and then you say some stuff in the middle that sounds terrible, and then you close it with something good at the end. So the whole perception of it is, oh, this sounded great. Like, oh my God, I like it.
Right.
And then you kind of forget about those things. And, you know, when I started listening to him, because I will say I do like a lot of his content. I actually do enjoy listening to it, and he's also entertaining. More than anything, he's very entertaining. But when you kind of get to the root of it, of this whole thing about men today that are feeling very much like looking for a figure, and you see it like, dude, he puts up a podcast with anyone, George Janko, viral. You're talking 10 to 20 million views, like absurd virality. Yeah. And it just speaks to today, these guys, and you see all over Instagram now where you have these, like, so many people are like motivational speakers on Instagram. They're motivating their small little crew of like 100 followers to 10,000 to 100,000, where it's like, I woke up, and I'm a victim of this, I do this, where it's like, I woke up, I did my animal-based diet, I worked out, now I'm going to go read and meditate. You know, they do the whole spiel thing. And it's like, this is kind of the big granddaddy of them all. and they all kind of pawn off of him, and they all create the society, which in a way is really good because it's improving men. But then you get some of these douchebags and dirtbags who then start doing things on the internet where, you know, they're just talking bad about women, or they're doing things that are ridiculous, and, you know, they're just doing it as kind of like a gotcha out there, and then they try to get attention. So it's a double-edged sword, and you try to think, what would be the contrast to this? What would be, if we didn't have like an Andrew Tate, if we didn't have a Jordan Peterson, which direction would be going? Would it be inevitable that a man would come up, or a woman who would, you know, speak to the men and speak to the women? Or would it be worse?
If there's a desire for something, that void will be filled. Someone will fill it. Mm-hmm. And, you know, he filled it in a big way, because I like your comparison between Peterson and him, because Peterson rose up pre-pandemic. It was a different world. And then the pandemic sent people inside, antisocial, took away the ability for young men to grow up in many cases, and they were looking for a figure because they weren't finding it in their home. And he was there. You know, some of his, like, I remember I turned on a podcast he was doing in the car with my dad over the summer.
Andrew Tate.
Yeah. And, like, we were listening in silence for 15 minutes. And then we, like, got there, and he goes, well, that was some weird shit. I was like, couldn't have said it any better myself. I mean, he's like, that guy's fucking crazy.
It shows you the audience, though. Like, it highlights it. You think, like, 40-year-old, 50-year-old, 60-year-old men are listening to Andrew Tate being like, oh, my gosh, this is the second coming?
Like, this is the dumbest shit I've ever heard in my life.
It's literally, like, 18 to, we'll call it, even, like, 30-year-olds.
Yeah.
Where they're just in their life, and, you know, you think about it, and it's like, it's so easy to be like, society blames. You can blame society for this. It's such a blanket statement. And I try to think of it and be like, okay, you know, there is a lot you can say that society perpetuates and makes you want to do and act, but is it entirely its fault? No, at a certain point, you're an individual. You can't be a victim. You know, I don't like the whole victim mentality. So at a certain point, it's like, man, I'm overweight. My life sucks. I can't get a girlfriend. I have a shit job. It's like, oh, I'm going to go to Andrew Tate and he's going to motivate me. That's great. Good motivation.
Go do something.
Go do something. But then it's like, why, you know, what caused you to be there? You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of people who are in those positions, and a lot of it is where they came from, their upbringing, their environment. Totally. But then you get the select few where they're stuck in that situation, and to me, it's like you go from being stuck in that situation, and then you go like 1,000% to Andrew Tate. And it's like, how does that click? How come you didn't find someone who, you know, was in your neighborhood, or someone that was close by? Like, why is it instantly someone that is so insanely hyper? You know what I mean? Like,
he's a magical figure that they see through a screen. He's a existence that they get to have on demand. You know, there's a, especially with the youngest generation, there's a real fog between what is digital and what's visual, what's here with them. There's a real fog of war with that for them. And so